And how do schools choose you, or do you choose the schools?
So in this instance, this one's a slightly sort of cheeky one because it's my niece and nephew's school. So I was like, I had to do it. So, if it wasn't for them, the book never would have happened. So that's the first one. But then there are other ones that are just sort of on the back burner in terms of trying to approach. And there are books in school libraries and stuff. We're up for doing author visits. We just need to know who's interested. Yeah. Bearing in mind, this is the first time I don't have an agent. Okay. And I've never published a book before, so I am literally making it up as I go along. I honestly have no idea what I'm doing.
You're doing a fabulous job.
It's but I think it's because we're Guji. At the end of the day, maybe because it's from our families, like you have to. Look what you've created out of nothing, basically, like this massive sort of interconnected interwebs thing, which feels like you can belong, which not necessarily all of the organizations that we can be associated with do feel like that. And it's so important right now to be able to feel like you belong. So actually I'm more impressed by what you've done than me being like, I will have a book out there.
We're lucky to have you and all the experience we have on the group, and it's fantastic. So and congratulations, by the way, on the book.
Yes, well done. And actually the group has been great, because who would have known that there was a journalist who's writing a book out there? We wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the group. And I think that's a big gap as well, is that we need to know that there's our people out there trailblazing and doing all of these exciting kind of things that nobody knows. So it's great to kind of do these interviews and even posts and everything, getting that out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then like the fact that, all the cooking or the artwork. I mean, I did this story a while ago, and I don't know if you're talking about it now, about, brown girls conquering Instagram. And at that point, it was actually quite difficult. I mean, I knew that they were there, but there was no curated space. Whereas you could see quite easy the Guji ones being like, hold on a minute, I'm already on Instagram, but for marketing or to let my community know, people that I'm networked to but yet don't know, then I can go here. And because there's now been that research, emergence of these online tribes that actually exist offline. And in the olden days, our parents would have just phoned, called Bar, and Bar would have known somebody who knows somebody who lives in some other place. Yeah, it is. That would have happened. Whereas it's so much harder for us. And so the fact that, being able to have Oshwal Connect, being able to be like, hold on a minute, I have something, and I don't have those old-fashioned, my bar sadly has passed away. I don't have bar. So you've become bar in a really weird way. I don't know if that's quite complimentary.
Kind of free.
We are bar. As a tagline, yeah. We are your bar.
But that's it. Do you remember? Because all our families, they've moved so much, like across so many different countries. I mean, I only realized a couple of years ago that we've got relatives in Madagascar, and yet now it's like, hold on a minute, how are we connected to our relatives in Madagascar? And that mum actually speaks to them, now, and WhatsApp and all that stuff. So we are completely interconnected, but you do need some people to be the catalyst in order to be able to connect us further. And I think that's even better for like the younger generations as well, because a lot of you have kids. I don't have kids at the moment, but a lot of people have kids, and it's like, hold on a minute, now we know where they can go, or where they can be inspired by people like us that aren't necessarily within our own spheres that we have, for whatever reason. I remember going to the BBC, and I didn't know anyone. Like, even when I wanted to be a journalist, I didn't know any journalists. I didn't know any Guji journalists. I didn't know any, I didn't know anybody like me that I could have gone to and said, I need to know what this career is like. Maybe I would have changed my mind, who knows? But I mean, like, I need to know, what it's like. I just wanted to tell stories. And so that was not necessarily easy. And I was really lucky that mum and dad were like, even though it's so weird, they were like, fine, we'll support you in that. But then I remember coming to the BBC, and it took a couple of years, and I met Dhruti Shah, who's way more famous, like is super famous and is amazing. And she's like, Radio 4 presenter. And I didn't know she existed. But then you speak to them and you're like, oh, hold on a minute. So so-and-so, Kakana Dikino, etc. And that would have been nice, in the same way that a lot of people that aren't Guji, aren't brown, have those interconnections already to be aware of that.
And that's 100%, because I think a lot of a lot of communities out there, they have that connection. I mean, if you look at the government and all of that, they've all got their kind of their connections, they've got their people and all of that. Whereas we have got something, but we haven't got that kind of platform where we can build, show, look at what our people have done. And this is the person you can go to chat to them, and just email them and say, I'm an Oshwal, I'm looking to go into this, and can you give me some advice or something like that? Because if you had someone, or even if we had someone like that, with the Oshwal Connect or anything, we may have found it a little bit easier.
Well, that's the thing, it's that element of belonging and being like, just be aware of what you're putting yourself into. And I think that's the key thing, even with the art and stuff, it's like you've got this immense focus on art, and I think that's so important because I like illustrations, etc. Be aware it's going to take this long. Be aware that even if you don't have it within your maybe your mother isn't an artist or your father isn't an artist and you haven't been exposed to it in that way, be aware that these are the career paths if you want to pursue it. Be aware that it is riskier for you, etc., etc. Be aware that you can do whatever. Be aware that you can, I don't know, put your art in for these competitions, because if you do that, you've then got a further platform. But we don't know that. Whereas again, by having these connections, it does make a huge difference. And I think especially, I mean, one of the things that I do is I don't have to do, sometimes I get asked to do speeches, etc., etc. And I did one very recently about connections and about resetting in a post-COVID world and a post-COVID economy. And it was really helpful because it gave me that moment to reflect and be like, holy moly, on one hand, I think a lot of people, like, when you're like the sort of second, third generation, you do a lot to try and figure out who you are. Am I British? Am I Indian? Am I Kenyan? What am I? And sometimes you can lose connections in that way. But actually, what's happened within the pandemic, you're like, I want to take on every single element of that. And I want to be able to find other people who are going through very similar thought processes about, who am I? What can I do here? Where can I build up a support network? In the same way that again, going back to our families, because I think for us, heritage is incredibly important. The same way that our families did as they had to move, for example, in some countries. How do I do that? And perhaps different to perhaps other cultures, we can do that because it's a part of us. It's just perhaps not a part of us that a lot of us have been able to tap into, because you're doing that constant feeling of belonging, when you are sort of our age and our generation. And that's not, I mean, I think a lot of different communities are doing that as well. Like I go to Instagram and I see things like Brown Girl Therapy, or I see, as I said, Brown Girl Gang, or professional Asians, to other communities that are happening. And it does make me think a lot. So I was really pleased that you reached out, but I was a bit like, oh gosh, am I the sort of person that you want to speak to? Because
you are.
But yeah, I'm just like a
also looking at you and saying, our kids, obviously you don't have kids, but we want our kids to think, we don't want them generally to be doctors, lawyers and dentists. There are other careers out there, and people like you are inspiring us and inspiring the next generation, hopefully. So when someone does want to be a brown journalist, she can come to talk to you.
Well, this is the other thing. It's like, you don't have, and I think this is what we do. You don't have to be one thing. And I think this is a thing that we can definitely tap into. And one thing that's, for me, becoming more and more important is like, I am a journalist, but because I have multiple identities, I go around telling people I'm Indian, Kenyan, British, and people are like, are you really Kenyan? I'm like, my parents are Kenyan, and they're like, are they? And I'm like, yes. What are you going to do about it? You have no right to tell me what I am. I can do what I want. I can be who I want to be. I'm a Londoner. And I think that's the thing, we want with our kids, whether it's careers or anything. It's like, you as long as you can see other people doing that, no, not even as long, if you believe that there are other people doing that, then you can go and access them, and we will give you that opportunity to access them. And it might not be for you whatsoever. I've had people I've had people come and go, should I be a journalist? And I'm like, on one hand, it's amazing. On the other hand, you do have to factor in that you are a person of color, and you are a minority within a not just an organization, but within an industry that doesn't have many people like you in it. And so that means that you have to build up a huge level of resilience and a huge level of tolerance, and you have to think about, who am I going to be? And for me, yeah, you know, I am a journalist, but I'm deliberately saying things like, I am an, you know, now I'm an author, which, you know, I'm like, why not? I am, you know, I have my fellowships, I have all these different things, because I don't want you to pigeonhole me in the way that it's very easy to pigeonhole people like us. You know, we've got a brown person. That does happen across lots of industries. You know, we've got the brown woman already, we don't need another one. And it's like, well, whoop-de-flipping do, you know, actually I can provide a lot more. And I think, again, with our, you know, with the next generation, or even our peers, because you do have career changes, I hope that that's what we're all able to do with each other, with seeing what people are up to. I really, you know, I love the stuff that you do in Oshwal Connect. I want to see what people are up to. You know, I'm sure there are really strange careers. I say strange, but, you know, my career, strange careers that we don't know about. You know, are there the scientists who are working in marine biology? That'd be well interesting. You know, what are they doing right now? And, you know, are there people doing, maybe they're not scientists, but they're doing research projects and they need more people to get involved? Well, can we get involved? You know, does that thing even exist? You know, so for me, I'm super impressed by you guys. As I said, I'm just going to keep saying that, you know, that this is happening. And I do think it's all about taking ownership as well. It took me a long time to feel comfortable with taking ownership about who I am and what I do, and definitely credit my family with that, because, you know, you're like, oh, on one hand, you're also very British in the respect, you're like, oh no, you know, I can't, I've got to be a bit shy. And it's like, well, that's not getting me anywhere, you know, it's not getting me anywhere at all. So it's that extra level of identity existentialism.
And it actually does show that, yeah, you know what? Being a brown girl, being brown, we have to fight. We've got to kind of push it. We've got to maybe not fight, but be confident, you know, be ready to push ourselves forward, be ready to say, yes, this is what I am. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that, and be proud of it. And I think sometimes when the older generation don't understand that there are other, like Panna was saying, other occupations out there. Oh, you don't have to just be a dentist, a pharmacist, a doctor, or an accountant or anything like that. You can be these different things, and it's okay to be something different. And I think that's what I think our generation, or the generation below us, are actually doing. They are showing everyone that, look, you know what, we can be something different.
I
So
think
it's great. And say that again.
So, and let's support one another as well while we're doing that. Let's power women, especially, you know, when we see someone who's doing something well, let's support her and praise her, as opposed to bringing her down.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We have enough haters, you know, people who already hate us because of the color of our skin, or because they think we're too young, or they, you know, or because of the fact, you know, in this instance, you know, we're three women, we're women. We already have enough haters who hate us without even knowing us. There's no need to then
add to that,
bring each other. Yeah, exactly right. Add to it, or bring each other down in that respect. You know, it's like somebody's doing something pretty cool. Maybe it's not for me, doesn't matter. At least I'm aware of it. Somebody's doing something pretty cool. Oh, okay, that is for me. Well, yeah, I'm definitely going to sort of put my name forward and support it. For me, I got a message the other day from someone who, are they India? Yeah, I think they were India rather than Nairobi. And they were like, where do I get your book from? And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, you know, to get somebody in India who's interested in it, because it's taken me quite a while to get it out there and to find connections, etc. And the minute one person has it, you've then got more of a chance of a ripple effect. And whether that's a book or anything else, that's really key. Like for me with this book, it's been a blimmin' pain in the butt, if I'm honest with you, to get to the point that I was like, do you know what, when my sister was like, oh, here's this group, I was like, okay, I'll put it on there. I know it's always a little bit embarrassing because you're like, hi, look at me, guess what I'm doing. But at the same time, I'm like, I want my book in schools and libraries. It's been flipping difficult to get to this point. I had I had so many rejections. I have to make sure that I put it out there. And then to get a message from someone saying, I think this is a really valuable learning tool. I'm in a different country. I'm interested in knowing how to get it. That to me is like, it was worth that moment of discomfort, because it's always not, ideal when you're talking about yourself, to be able to be able to do that. And again, I don't know if that's a British thing or it's just a general, or maybe it's a you know, a false imposter thing. Yeah. Who knows? So for me, yeah, that's what you want, but it's just having that you know, network. And not everyone, as I said, not everybody wants to hear it because you're not conventional, you know. It's, I mean, this isn't an Asian thing. I remember when I was pitching for the book and I was trying to pitch to agents, so I still don't have one, so still unconventional, and somebody emailed me back saying, you know, seems interesting, but it's not very conventional. Come back when you've got something conventional. And I'm like, well, I can't. Yeah, no, I mean, I had a friend luckily opposite me who said something a little bit more sweary, but it was like, I can't, because, you know, I'm not basic like that. Like, you know, that's what my friend said. And I was just like, I can't offer you something conventional. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But, you know, when you get that feedback, you're like, oh man, is that what people want? Because everybody can offer. Well, that's the thing.
The other thing is you've also become your own PR manager at the same time. So forget you're this renowned journalist and a co-author, you're now a PR manager as well.
Which is awkward because, you know, coming from, you know, often you're like, oh no, but journalism versus PR. And people used to say, oh, if you go from journalism into PR, it's the dark side. And it's like, probably vice versa. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. At the end of the day, it is marketing. And in fact, something they need to teach you from a very young age, actually, in terms of having that level of confidence and how to sell your story. But at the same time, though, maybe, you know, it's weird because I used to be incredibly shy. I know I still can be, like, you wouldn't think it, but I can be. And it's like, I disassociate. It's like, but hold on a minute, this is Dhruti who on paper can do X, Y, Z. So therefore she's done it already, so she can do it again. It sounds really weird, actually. But then I managed to make it sound like I'm not completely like abnormal by, like, there's some great books out there where they use those examples and say, well, Malala does that. And I'm like, well, if Malala does it, then it's fine. You know, if she's done it and everything she's gone through and she did, you know, she's saying that, you know, Malala would do this. I'm like, yes, that's fine. I will go with that. You know, it does take a real amount of chutzpah though to get into that mode of thinking. But as I always think about end goals, it's like, I don't know, I don't know if you've added me on LinkedIn, like it's worth, my LinkedIn's so peculiar because I'm just a bit like, oh, and look, on one hand, I've done this, or I've just done this mental health project. It's really worth you guys knowing about. And then I have to go, I'm putting it out there, even though I sound so weird, I'm putting it out there because otherwise, how will people know about it? You know, someone's got to tell them there is a product there that will help them. So in this instance, it's a product about, it's a film that I'm hosting, so I'm the presenter for. So that's out of my comfort zone to a degree. And it's how people from different minority backgrounds, and I didn't know this phrase, ethnically marginalized is now the phrase of choice, which I really like. So people like us from ethnically marginalized backgrounds, how they can have coping tips to cope with any mental health challenges that are happening. So I'm like, well, I can sit there and keep that to myself, or all that effort that's gone in for however many months. Yeah, it's say to people, look, it's here, and if you want it, at least you can look at it. But what works is that element of personalization. So this comes from the journalist and from doing lots of digital strategies, as you well know, because you guys are clearly now the queens of it. But it's like, if you've got that element of personalization, people are more likely to respond to it, aren't they? Rather than, here is a stone. Well, here's a stone with a story. So, you know, we all have a story to tell. I'm going to stop because I keep talking a lot.
Yeah, and that is it's all about you. So yeah, keep going.
You say that, my sister will be like, oh god.
So Dhruti, what made you kind of write the book?
So I had been on a peace fellowship. Gosh knows how I ended up there. Again, getting out of my comfort zone in Thailand. And it made me think quite differently in terms of dialogue and how one resolves peace. And really, the first point is to have some sort of conversation, so some dialogue. And the reason why that's important is that when I came back from the fellowship in Thailand, whenever you've done something major, it can put you into a bit of a, oh, now what? I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels like that when you're coming to a chapter end. It's like, oh, trying to think about it all. And I didn't have to. I went to the business unit at the BBC, which is where I work, because I'm really good at storytelling. I don't have a business background, and they wanted to sort of give a bit of an oomph to their business coverage in the social sphere. So I'd been doing a little bit of that before I went to Thailand. Then I came back, and so I was doing double projects, a lot of work, and there were moments when I would be in meetings and I wouldn't fully understand what people were saying. So because I don't have that investment background and I never learned anything around business studies, etc., it's just more about getting something complicated and distilling it into a more relatable manner. So, on one hand, I'm like super confident that I can do that. On the other hand, when it's a subject that you're not wholly familiar with, and when people are talking about it, it becomes very much a place that you have to learn to decode, because there is a lot of assumptions made that, this is what the audience is like, and we're approaching for a broader audience. So what was happening is that as I was trying to resolve so many thoughts going on in my head, I was having therapy at that point, like on the commute back to work, I would be sketching, and one common theme that would come out would be animals. And then I'd start hearing animals in the meetings. So they'd be talking about, at that point, Philip Hammond, who was our chancellor, Hammond is a hawk, or you'd hear about Facebook being a unicorn. And animals I can get. I understand animals. That's the first thing that, as a kid, that you very much learn about, color, shapes, animals. And so those sketches started to become a little mini project. And the more I kept doing it, the more I was like, oh, hold on a minute, there's something in this. And I couldn't find a book out there already. So I could find little bits and bobs, but I just couldn't find a book. And it got to a point where you start to learn what you're good at, what you're not so well, no, just it's worth delegating. And I found another guy who works, it turns out worked at the BBC as well. So I messaged him and said, I've seen your artwork, I like your animals, do you want to team up with me? And I was very lucky, we were talking about belonging earlier, that straight away he was like, I get this. Not everybody did. Some people were like, this is a really stupid idea, but he was like, I understand what you're doing. I have no idea where this is going to end up, but I'll come along on the journey. I mean, I get to draw, animals, and you're giving me freedom to draw whatever the heck I want. I was like, just draw animals. Like we will talk about it afterwards. Just do what I tell you to do. No, but within reason. Here is some content. Go and do something. And so I was very lucky in that I met this guy Dominic, and he was willing to come along with the journey. And the next thing you knew, we were like, well, we've started creating something. Now what to do with it? And at first there was a lot of, it was very confusing for people as to what we were creating. So we had to literally create a product. And at that point, it was an A to Z. So we just picked 26 creatures. We cheated on X because it's hard enough to find an animal beginning with X, let alone one with a business connection. So we used the IBEX, which is the Spanish stock exchange. And we literally, A is for alligator spread, B is for bear market, C is for cash cow, D is for dragon bond. So we went all the way through. And then we were like, hold on a minute. So I managed to then persuade the BBC to take that. So again, I'm lucky that I had that privilege that I was finally able to pitch an idea there. And we would see on Twitter schools and business schools saying, students, you need to look at this. This is something that's helpful. And then after that, I was like, hold on a minute, this could become a good book idea. But again, because despite the fact I worked for the BBC, there are always complications, etc. And again, if you don't have an agent, which I didn't have, it wasn't like, oh, here's a book deal straight away. That's just not how it works. Like I had a meeting with Penguin, but Penguin were a bit confused about like how they'd actually be able to sell it in supermarkets. They'd be able to sell it, etc., etc. So I was learning a lot more about the publishing process. And then what it boiled down to was like, I knew that I already had material. I knew that this was something of interest. And I knew that once I found the right people who would have a little bit of platform to be able to help me get it into the places it needs to be, it would become a thing. I had that self-confidence, which I know not everybody necessarily has, but with this one I was like, this is ridiculous. There is a gap in the market because people like me who don't understand things will be looking for it. There's clearly interest in it, and I want to now get into schools and libraries. And at that point, my nephew, he had won a competition for our local library, so thank the Lord for me, as it were. I went along with him for his award ceremony, and the head of library service was there. So I went to go and speak to him and said, if I wanted to get my book into schools and libraries, what am I supposed to do? And he was like, it's better for you to go through a traditional publisher because the distribution networks are already set up. So bearing in mind, I didn't know any of this stuff, so that's why we didn't go for self-publishing in the end. We were like, this is the goal and this is how we're going to have to get there. And it was hard. And as I said, every evening my mum would be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's the book again. I'm looking for animals. Here's my spreadsheet. And I had, we've got there's 138 animals in the book, and we've got more than that because I couldn't fit them all in. And poor Dominic, I mean, we would get fed up at points because I was like, oh, let's just have a break from this, because you do get that when you've got something. But I was adamant that if I hadn't pushed to the 100th degree, I would be so angry with myself that I hadn't tried my hardest. And so in that instance, rejection after rejection after rejection, and people would feed back, and they weren't horrible feedback like this is dumb. It was like, this is interesting, but it doesn't work for us because of it doesn't fit our needs this year, or you'd get no response, or it was hard, until eventually I managed to speak to one of my mentors, and that's why having mentors and sponsors is also really important. And we were just having a general catch up. He's not an author as such. He's related to all my trauma stuff that I do, because this is also why it's useful to have lots of different fingers in lots of different pies. And we were just having a chat, and then he was telling me about how he's like, it's really funny because like you've got a product and you haven't got an agent, and I've got an agent and I don't have a product. And I was just like, 3 days later, I was like, that's not funny. That's like not that funny. Hold on a minute. Why can't I do something with this conversation? And fair play to him, he was willing to give me the name of his agent. So again, it's that sort of going back to what we were talking about, networking. So he gave me the name of his agent. I messaged his agent. I pursued it because I could have easily been forgotten about. His agent looked at the book. And then again, he gave me a name of the publisher that he goes, this would be a right publisher for you to at least try to approach. He goes, it's not for me, which is fine. At least he had the courtesy to look at it. It's not for me, try this. And so then again, breaking all the rules that you're not really supposed to do, I sent a copy in, bypassing what is known as the slush pile, which is where a lot of the books sort of pile up, as it were. And I managed to get it in front of the person who has the say so, as it were. And then
Rowling's book was on that slush pile as well.
Yes, it boils down to, well, that's the thing, it boils down to chance. It depends on who's going to be looking at the slush pile, or who's going to be the person who's going to be like, oh, that's the one, here's the decision. So I was like, I need to get in front of a decision maker. And again, you do that even if it's not an authorship, it's something that it's very valuable. So I got to the decision maker, and my gosh, because things never happen easily in life, I was supposed to be heading the next week to America for a stint working for the BBC as their social writer. So pretty much the dream job. I'd be going out there, I'd be doing field work. And then I get a letter an email from the publisher saying, can we meet on the day I'm supposed to be flying out? And I was like, no. Well, not like no, but oh no. It's like, when you're like, I've been waiting for this for so long. There's no way I'm going to be able to fit in a meeting in London, before my flight goes. It's just not going to happen. So I was like, look, this is happening. I really want to meet you, because I know once I'm in front of people, again, as we know, that story, it will make such a significant difference than when you've got the product. And so, I got in front of the publishing director. She, we had this huge conversation. She loved me in terms of me being like, this is what I want. This is what I can offer. I will market the hell out of this book. I will be doing stuff. And she took a chance, because our publisher didn't do business books. And she went, you know what, I like the way that you operate. I like what you've done. I've looked back at your CV. I've looked at your history of doing things. And then and then I went to America, I was trying to figure it all out there. And then the blooming pandemic hit, and I came back, and I'm like, no, this is not. And clearly pandemic's more, incredibly difficult, incredibly important. And it was just weird, because then we had to get a book out in the pandemic. And the thing is, Dominic, the illustrator, we're both doing really weird, our jobs within the organization, within the BBC, we're both working on something pretty difficult, where we're as well as doing a lot of our day jobs, we're also then contacting the relatives of the deceased. Okay. So we're doing a lot of very intense, basically frontline pandemic work in that respect. And that in itself is not, it's not easy. Like Dominic's, behind working on the tributes page. I'm the person who's I'm one of the very small number of us making calls. And then we're also trying to publicize a very ridiculous book. And because we don't have the machinations, we were basically left to our own devices in order to be able to do it. So you're going against the fact that the bookshops aren't open. So a book like this is the sort of book you'd see in a bookshop that you just pick up. So I'm having to deal with that, having to deal with the fact that, we're not famous, so that is actually not great in the book environment. Dealing with the fact we're doing pretty difficult stuff at work, dealing with the fact where pandemics are happening and we are at home having to deal with our own lives, and Dom's got kids and I live with my family, and there's a lot of issues there in terms of trying to figure stuff out. And then this dang book that we want to get out there, because when we come to that post-COVID economy, which we're now emerging, it's going to be incredibly useful at the end of the day. That's the thing. It took four years to get to the point of it getting out. And then even like the last in the book, it's got there's a particular animal called the hamster calf, which means hamster purchase. Okay. And in the book, so it's a picture of a hamster with its mouthful of toilet rolls and in a shopping trolley. So that was one of the words that emerged at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's very current as well in that respect. So we're like, we need to get it out there. And we were talking earlier about marketing and PR. I literally had yet another spreadsheet, and it was, it didn't get many reviews in the first instance, which again was, it's not traditional, it's not conventional in that respect. Yeah, so I had to think of other ways. Literally had to be innovative in the way to think about it, like, approaching people on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is just like, hello, you don't know me, but I've got a book you might be interested in. Being aware that people will just ignore you, so again, not taking that personally. Approaching people on Twitter. I ended up on so I got a mention in USA Today from speaking to somebody on Twitter. So it got out there. Business Insider, again, through speaking to somebody on Twitter. The Daily Mail, through speaking to someone on Twitter. LinkedIn, I got into Financial World magazine. Managed, so it's a lot of having to think on my feet and be like, right, push myself forward, have to push my story forward as well, because people want to know what's the story behind it, that this is a woman who has no business background, who is entering an industry where she's yet again a minority, has created a book that's ridiculous but also very credible, approaching people like naturalists. So we got a letter back from Sir David Attenborough, who said that he could learn something from it. So I was like, and even then people were like, but it's not a nature book. And I'm like, it is a nature book. It's the nature book because it's got animals in it. And then my niece, bless her, she really like gave me the because they're very young, but you're like, what? She's like, it's like fiction, non-fiction. And I'm like, oh my god, yeah, but that's the thing, it is fiction, non-fiction, isn't it? It's like, because it's non-fiction because it's like these are the words that exist, but it's fiction because people are coming up with these terms, anthropomorphizing them in order to be able to help people decode a very difficult world. Cash cows, we grow up knowing what cash cows are, but actually, what does it actually mean? Gorillas, I didn't know about the existence of gorillas in the world of business, but it probably made me far more excited about it, and maybe more likely to have done business studies GCSE if I knew things like that. And unicorns, I mean, right now everybody talks about unicorns, but actually, does everyone know what a unicorn is? That it's $1 billion startup. Yeah, there's so many things. And so that's literally how the book came about, and how it's become I think in a way how it's become a bit of a success, because it was just sheer grit and sheer determination that it would become a success. I mean, there are clearly bonus moments, like it's one of the business, it's one of the short business book, and clearly that depended on the judges, but they were like, this is perfect. And I'm like, yes, it's perfect, apart from like there's like 3 typos in it which really irritate me, but it's perfect. You can see I'm so bothered about it, but it's perfect because I was like, dang right, it's going to be perfect before we get it out there. Like, not that I think you should always strive for perfection, but because if there's nothing else like it, you really have to push to that 100th degree. And I'm like, it's such a simple idea. It is, you've seen it. It doesn't take you that long to read. It's really short. It's, maybe 2 paragraphs maximum per animal, if even that. And the animals are ridiculous. For Skunk Works, which is an experimental group that you have within different companies that started with Lockheed Martin, you've got a steampunk skunk, which is amazing because steampunk is all about experimenting. So it's those images at stake. Now, if you and I had this conversation, I mean, we wouldn't have had this conversation like 7 years ago, but do you know what I mean? I never would have been able to talk to you off the top of my head about business terms. I know that there are children, from like 6, 7 years old. They don't need to know the ins and outs of those words. They didn't need to know that right now, but they can tell you, oh, a bear market, that's to do with stocks and shares. They can tell you. I mean, I mean, my poor niece, that's because she hears it all the time. But do you know what I mean? It means they're not scared of a world that.
Did your niece and nephew proofread your book for you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, maybe it's only because they wanted their names in it, but they were very they were adamant. You know, in fact, the other day they were saying to me like, they're like, we're doing some marketing on your book. I'm like, what now? And they're like, yeah, we're making sure there's pictures. So we've got to put copies of the book and we're going to take pictures of us reading it, but don't show our faces because, you know, social media and all that. And I'm like, you're so ridiculous. I'm like, what have I created? But that's not a bad thing, because you have like for someone who's doing business, you know, child entrepreneurs, you know, you have 10-year-olds. We hear those stories of 10-year-olds having businesses. We hear those stories of like teenagers, you know, doing incredibly well. And I think the intention was always to make this as accessible as it could be. And even if you're not a teenager, we're at a point where, you know, a lot of people are talking about the Great Resignation or the Great Reset, and people are thinking, you know, life is very short because of what's happened with the pandemic. In a way, this could also help them with career changes, because as I said, there's terms in there which again I didn't know about until I started digging into it, but the purple squirrel, and that's a recruitment term which means basically the perfect candidate. And so recruiters want a purple squirrel that fits every single criteria that they have on their adverts. But purple squirrels, have you ever seen one in real life? Does it actually exist? You know, which makes it a little bit easier when you look at a job and you're just a bit like, they're looking for a purple squirrel. Well, they don't really exist. So what can I actually offer in this instance? At least that's what I hope the takeaway would be, that somebody's able to do that.
I've been in banking for 15 years of my life, and there's so many terms I haven't even come across. And it could be because I was pigeonholed in certain aspects of banking that I didn't come across these. But this is a great book. I'd give it to my son to read, who's picking economics for A-levels. And it's snippets of information. So even if you're not in the financial or banking world, they're great little snippets and reads you could have on your journey on the train or the bus, or even if you're doing a long car journey. And I thought, I love the Japanese cat, the beckoning cat. And until I read your book, I would have thought it's a Chinese cat we associate to Chinese restaurants. And the beckoning, it's not saying hello to us. So, you know, well done.
That's the thing, it's stuff that's all around us in plain sight as well. I didn't know it's called a maneki neko at all. That was the first time I heard. And it's because we're going, well, actually, how come, you know, the business world is a wide world. You know, we've got the meerkats, the meerkat investors, for example. All of these terms we did check. You know, we checked if it's not the OED, we were checking finance reports. Like, I don't know how you do it. I was like, oh my God, what wasn't going on here with having my highlighter and trying to understand what people are talking about and securities and all that stuff. But all it's ever intended to be is a primer, to be like, see all this stuff that's happening around you, or you hear this being discussed. Even if you know it already, then you've got a fun picture to look at. If you don't know it, then you can quickly go and have a quick look. And for me, it's helpful because, you know, in a way, maybe that's my excuse, where I'm like, if someone says to me, well, what does this mean? I'm like, I have no idea. I can't remember. You know, I spent like 4 years on it, and my brain power is a little bit diminished. But then I'll be like, it's okay, because I can go back to the little book and I can turn it the right round, and I can have a look and tell you that actually, you know, I'm trying to think of one. A peacock, you know, investor is all about bluster, basically. And see how that straight away comes to my head, because I'm thinking of the image first, and then I can go in and then talk about the specific definition and say that it came up with Hargreaves Lansdown. And for me, it's really important. And I think in a way why, even though, you know, people are like, it's a little bit of a strange book, because I come from a verification background, and because of the journalism and having to double check facts and figures and do all that research, that all of that has been applied in this instance. In fact, I was talking to one of our brilliant trainers who does it's called OSINT, so, you know, open source intelligence, you know, that you use in forensic investigations when you're trying to reference whether something has happened or not. And I said, it's a little bit strange that all of this, you know, this intelligence training, a lot of it I've ended up applying to my little ridiculous business book at the end of the day, you know. And but it does help build confidence, because if again, bearing in mind that I don't come from that background, and I've managed to create a book that becomes successful from a very simple idea. If I can do it, I honestly don't see why other people who have a good idea that might be simple can't do the same thing.
Oh. You know, I think the illustrations in your book are fantastic. If I, when we do buy your published version, my daughter will love looking at your pictures, and my son hopefully will read it. And it's an amazing book. And you know, he's doing A levels. Who else do you want it to be read by? Who is your target audience?
Now you sound like the publishers. The thing is that was so difficult to put in. So they are, when you're creating a book, and maybe you'll have one off the back of Oshwal Connect, who knows, you know, that you could have one. They do say, like, what is this similar to? You know, what is the audience that you're targeting? And you know, Dominic and I would sit there for very many nights just being like, this is quite difficult, because there's nothing like it on the market. So there's nothing quite similar to what we're looking for. You know, there is no such thing as a business bestiary. There are bestiaries where people are looking specifically at animals. There are reference guides, there are encyclopedias, but there's nothing like this. And then in terms of the audience, well, again, this is an issue, because the illustrations are very much there for people who already know about banking, finance, etc., or kids who just want to look at pretty pictures. But the copy could be very well, you know, easily used and it is being used, you know, on university reading lists, for somebody who's beginning a career in the finance world, or someone who wants to know about, you know, investments, which we all know a lot of people are talking about now, that, you know, the retail investments, for example. It is literally for anybody and everybody. And so that's how I'm pushing it, in that, yeah, if you like nature. And we had a review actually the other day from a nature site in America, and it was interesting reading the review, because he was like, on one hand he goes, I don't really want to recommend it, because, you know, it is there's some pretty there's some myths in there. I mean, we do debunk the myths, but, you know, like about like lemmings and lemmings killing themselves by like jumping off cliffs, which is a complete and utter made up tale that comes from like a Disney film from very, very, very long ago. You know, it's been debunked, but at the same time, this is a really good book. This is what this guy is saying. This is a really good book, because, you know, if you can give it to your banking friends in case they're ever snobby about you being like an environment person. You're like, you're no different to me. See, you have animals in your world. And I love that review. I was like, this is brilliant. So on one hand he's like, oh, I don't know what to do about this. On the other hand, he's like, oh, but, you know, I like it. So there's that. But as I said, you know, Michael Rosen, who is, you know, was the poet, he had so much to say from it. And this is a guy who teaches kids all the time. And, you know, we had a conversation, because I did a Radio 4 podcast with him, where we ended up talking about how catfish on one hand is being used quite significantly now. I mean, there was a program the other day, The Circle, which was on over the pandemic and stuff, and that was all about catfishing. But then when I was talking to him, and you don't actually have this in the book, but, you know, when you start doing research, I was saying, but then there are all these other allegories where actually catfishing, you know, goes back to talking about things like Christianity and history, and lots of different things. And, you know, when me and him had the discussion on that podcast. But yeah, I cannot give you an audience. Say again?
And it's like threading it all together.
Yeah. This is the thing though, like you said it earlier, pigeonhole. The minute you start doing this sort of thing, you start realizing how much animal terminology is used. And not just in one language. This is the other thing. We actually haven't sadly published anything on this as yet, but, you know, in multiple languages as well. You know, the animals come up in many different forms, because they are a way for us to be able to communicate. So whether you're a 5-year-old learning words, or, you know, learning things, to a, I don't know, 100+-year-old, the intention is just to educate. And I think, and maybe that's because of the background that I have with the journalism, and I have to appeal to a wide audience, trying not to alienate people. Maybe that's where it comes from. But yeah, that's where in fact a lot of my stories, I would say, are pretty much like that. I try not to alienate people in any way, because why would you want to? You want everybody to be curious about what you're teaching them.
Right. That's totally true. One of the things that I took away from your book as well is that it would be great in school libraries and in libraries, because it's not a one-off read. It's not, oh, I've read this and that's it. Actually, you can keep on going back to refer back to it. And yeah, I love the fact that it's quite small paragraphs as well. It's not anything massive, so you don't have to take in so much information. You've got the diagram there, and it's so easy to kind of understand. And yeah, I would probably give it to someone if I you know, if you wanted to have a dinner party, not that we're going to have one anytime soon, but if you wanted to have a dinner party and you wanted to show off your knowledge a little bit, you could, you know, use it as a conversation starter or something like that. So I'd say it would, you're right, it would appeal to many ages and many different types of people as well.
You just actually made me think, hold on a minute, why haven't I gone for like Quizmasters? Dang damn it. You've literally just given me another sort of audience to go for, being like, trivia, that's it. That's what I need to go for. Or like, you know, those pop-up supper clubs saying, hey, if you're doing that, have you thought about getting this? I mean, I am in an ideal world, if I'm honest with you, I would love for like big corporations or big companies or businesses, whatever, to think about getting copies to either give to their staff who are like new starters, but ideally to donate to, you know, charities or to schools or to libraries, etc. Because that's the thing, what we are discovering is that sadly a lot of these places are disadvantaged, and yet they're the ones that need it the most. So at the moment, that's my other big push as well, is just sort of being like, look, we are, you know, if you have money and you want to do something philanthropic, then there is potentially an opportunity to do it with this, you know. And then I'm probably being also a little bit selfish here as well, because the way that books are, you have like unless again you're super famous, you have a limited print run. And having worked in children's publishing a long time ago, and I really hope they don't do this as much now, but you know, when books weren't sold and they came to the end of their life, they were pulped. And that gives me such a sort of, oh my gosh, I literally cried the first time I discovered that. And I'm like, I am trying to make sure that the book doesn't get pulped, but actually gets to places that it needs to be in order to help people, you know. And for me, that I wouldn't have pursued it for 4 long years if that wasn't an end goal. I mean, as I said, I did have my niece and nephew being like, have you got published yet? Have you got published yet? Have you got published yet? Which, you know, you're like, oh God, I don't want to go back to them and go, no, nobody wants to publish it. So that also helped with the, you know, the rejections or this wasn't for us. But that is the goal, is to try and get it to places that really need it in order to help them just understand a really very, very confusing world right now. You know, a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have got to be quite entrepreneurial in terms of the way that they're approaching things. And this could be a little tool, you know, in their toolkit. And I think that's the other thing. So for me, in a way, the pandemic has been really interesting in that respect. I mean, as I said, we got our book out and members of our publishing team were furloughed. Dominic did the book cover, and you don't normally get that. Like, you know, the fact that the illustrator then also becomes involved in that aspect. But we had to step up at the end of the day because, you know, you do. So I don't know. For me, I hope that telling my story, it just inspires people to think that if they've got, it doesn't have to be a book, but, you know, if they've got something in them that they want out in the world, it's not going to be easy, but it is possible to keep doing it and learn a lot about yourself in the process. And with the product now it's out in the world, trying to get into the places that the people and places that will want to learn from it. I'll tell you again something though, from like, again, relating to Oshwal, which has been really helpful. And I didn't know this. It's now in the library in Nairobi, which is great. And I didn't know that Textbook Centre was actually started by an Oshwal, and Textbook Centre is one of the main bookstores in Nairobi. And I was just like, whoa. And because I think Oshwal put in the first order, that's how I'm pretty convinced that that's what's happened. Wow. It means that Textbook Centre has it and they're taking it stuff. So I'm really grateful for that. But it means also I've got friends and family out there who aren't Oshwal who know where to get it from. And in fact, I've had you know, one of my friends, he's back in the UK at the moment, but he was in Nairobi, and I don't know if he literally was like, I have her book, everybody, look, I have her book. And I was like, thanks, Ishmael. And then, you know, I have another friend from my Peace Fellowship, and she messaged me the other day going like, you know, I'm so proud of you, I've got your book, I'm in, you know, and we hadn't spoken for maybe a year or so, and I was just a bit like, this is ridiculous, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous in the grand scheme of things, but that's so cool that there was that support in a different country, as it were, in is it the fatherland? Is it India the motherland and Kenya the fatherland? So yeah, it's nice to have that, because sometimes you just need one person to believe in you,
like you said, I think the ripple effect.
Yeah, and you know, and that's all you need. I just need that ripple effect, and I honestly believe that once it happens, it'll be good. You know, I'd love to. I mean, India's going for a really difficult time at the moment. Let's face it, it's going through hell. There's no other way of putting it. And I would love that anything that I can do to help people as they learn to navigate and come out of this hell, and that it's there for them if they so wish, if they so need. And so I'm trying to figure out plans with that, because of the fact, as I said, I have that heritage and you have that connection. You know, it's really, really important to keep that. But yeah, so that's the story of the book.
Connect, who's in India, who can help you with that, would be great if they can reach out.
Yeah, just reach out, just say to me hi. You know, like I said, I'm hoping for that one person who initially messaged me that it will lead to other things. But I don't know. I think, like I said, just the way that we have all grown up, and you know, this is the first time we've all properly spoken, but the way that we've grown up, I think we've seen the sacrifices and stuff that our families make and have made in terms of their travel, in terms of like the way that they've had to deal with stuff. And I think in a way, growing up with that, you cannot not believe in yourself when you've seen our families do that. And so the book is just one product. You know, for me, it always is testament to a strong heritage behind me. And it's always also, I have to push it, because I don't want to sound really ridiculous here, but if I can get it through, then I would hope that others, you know, we're opening the doors for others, and that is what we have to do. It's so important to be like, let's have these conversations, because that will open a door. I hope it opens a door to anyone, you know, who's
books should sit on everyone's bookshelves at home, like a bit like a thesaurus or a reference book that you can go back to day in, day out, as and when you need it.
Yeah.
And I think all of us should have one.
I'm not going to disagree. But yeah, I hope it's testament. But as I said, there's so much artwork and so much amazing things that are emerging on, you know, on your group, for example, on Oshwal Connect, that it's going to be really interesting to watch, to see where people have got that level of confidence from being like, oh, hold on a minute, people are actually interested in what I do, to see where that will then end up in 2-3 years time. You know, you're probably creating new businesses without being necessarily aware of this. You know, you probably already have, that somebody did something and then someone's actually gone and approached them and brought their one thing that they maybe did as a hobby.
Oshwal Connect, actually.
Yeah,
so, it's happening, but it's the start of a movement, hopefully. And people will, I think the shark community, or the Oshwal community, should I say, are quite reserved, but our platform has shown us that people are willing to reach out and make connections. And I think that's where it's going to start. And hopefully, same with your book, you know, people will go out and be aware of the book and go out and buy it and support you.
Yeah, and be like, this is a Shah girl. You know, Shah girl, she'd be like, Shah woman. This is a Shah woman.
I think related even.
Well, this is I used to work at the Harrow Observer. So my journalistic career started at the Oxford Gazette and the Harrow Observer. And that was so funny, because by the time I got settled in, and my patch was Pinner, as at some point, you know, I'd make sure that we'd get they never really covered any Jane stories before. So I was like, no, hold on a minute. Like, you've got a significant Jane population in Harrow. We've got to start doing stuff like that. But there were points where people would be phoning me up, and I could tell that they were giving me stories because of the fact they're like, hold on a minute, one of ours works here, so she should be aware of the fact that this is happening. And we would get stories that we weren't necessarily getting before.
Fantastic.
And well, this thing, by the time I left, doesn't matter, because that person realized that they could still continue to share their stories, even if a Shah wasn't there at that point. But the Shah was the first point of contact that they were familiar with, in order to be able to sell, in order to be able to not sell, but, you know, in order to be able to share their story. And that's what you want with any sort of storytelling mechanism, that people feel confident enough that there is at least one person, and one would hope it doesn't matter what, you know, what creed they are, what diversity, what there are, but there is at least one person that has had that. Yeah,
raised through you, obviously, and through this person who contacted, the Harrow Observer in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it was really interesting that when people were like, you're the Shah, and I'm like, well, not the Shah, but yeah, I am Shah. What's your story? Is it Harrow related? Then we can have I'm the current Shah in this particular domain. But yeah, that's, you know, and I know people, I don't know, I mean, I know I get messages. I remember getting this is bad. Like I said, my Gujarati, I wish it was way better, and I've got to go back and repick things up. But I remember getting a message from some random person in India many moons ago, and I think I've got it in my saved folder of, like, you know, when you're having a bad day and you look back at good stuff. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I do this if I'm having a bad day and then I look back at what nice things people have said. And somebody messaged me. I have no idea who they are. I don't even know how they came across me, because this was maybe this was at the start of my BBC career. And they just written something about how it was great to see, like, you know, to see a Shah over. And I had to go and get my mum and dad to translate, because I didn't know what was going on whatsoever. And I was like, have they even got the right person? Because it could be they've got me mixed up with another Dhruti. That does still happen even now. And they were like, no, you know, this person. So then I had to get my mum and dad to help me to put a response back. Maybe it's in Hindi rather than Gujarati. I don't know. It was really strange. But it's moments you realize that actually what you do, and again with what you're doing, it has more significance than you perhaps necessarily realize at the time. You know, you're just like, oh, I think this is good, I'm going to do it. And then actually people are interested in you for different reasons. You know, it's weird. That's what I say. It's just weird.
I guess it's another take on your article, you know, the one that somebody answered, no, called the wrong name at work. So how names are powerful. And in this case, the surname's powerful because it tells you which community that you belong to, and that, you know, people can trust you and stuff like that. I guess also first names are used in that way as well. So it just shows that actually names, community, all of that is quite powerful, and it's I know we're kind of moving out, but to bring it back so that we can have that support, so that we can have that network that we need to kind of go further and have that confidence to go further. I think it's so important.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with the name. My name is let's face it, my name is a very Gujarati name. There's no doubt about it. You know, it's Dhruti. Like, and for me, if I'm honest with you, the name piece was a slightly, I would say the word ridiculous, because I think a lot of things are just literally ridiculous. I'd got to a point where I was a bit fed up of being called the wrong name, that, you know, I'm like, and also being mixed up with the other brown person, you know, who was very different, wasn't, you know, necessarily Gujarati, etc. That I was like, screw this. I was like, that's it. You know, there is a lot of history behind this name at the end of the day. I'm not always fully sure what the history is because I get told different things, but the thing is, there is a lot of history behind this. I'm not a Dorito, and I don't like the fact that, you know, autocorrect believes that, you know, Dhruti should be a Dorito, because it shouldn't. And I was very lucky that, you know, I was very lucky that I had an editor who understood about the importance of names, as you say, and she came from a different heritage, but was like, we're always being put in these positions. So she was like, as long as you can come up with a way that nobody else has yet discussed, let's do it. And because I went that one step further, because I clearly always like to go one step further, and I managed to track down the inventor of autocorrect, she was like, you're so ridiculous, but let's do this, you know, like, let's put this together. And then, as you see in the piece, which is on the website, names, man, like, with us, you know, I had the naming ceremony when I was born. My parents did the naming ceremony, so it's not like, oh, here's like a throwaway name. It's like, no, there's actually a lot of thought put into it. And now with taking on ownership, you know, again, but just with the book, how many times when we were growing up did you see a Shah on a book? Like, you didn't. You know, how many times did you ever see a Dhruti? Again, you didn't, because it just wasn't the done thing. So with a lot of my journalism, and that names piece especially, because I do now a lot of like diversity and inclusion events around the fact that the name thing went a bit viral, as it were. It's like, man, other people don't have to sit there going, oh, they're going to get Phil wrong or whatever, they're going to get James wrong. Why am I having to sit there thinking, oh, well, maybe today I'll get like called Dirty, like, you know, hi, can I speak to Dirty Shah? No, you cannot speak to Dirty Shah. This isn't that sort of flipping phone, sorry, this isn't that sort of phone line. This is work, and this is things that we have to do. Dynamic. So with all my articles thus far, you can see there is a common theme of taking ownership or encouraging others to take ownership. And again, I'm very lucky, you know, and who knows how long it's going to last, because, you know, we are in a state of flux, that the positions I've been in, or I've been able to put myself in, I have been able to use those platforms and that privilege to try and make things better for not just myself but others, because it's so flipping difficult to get there in the first place. And I would hope, again, that's what we all do as Shahs, because we know how, or not just Shahs, but as Oshwals, as any community that you're part of, because it's so hard for us individually, that we need to make sure that we support each other and that we look out for each other and we don't bring each other down, because we have so many other people who are willing to bring us down for what we are. So I think for me, that's the most important thing. As I said throughout, I have just the utmost respect for what you're doing, because I think it's amazing. And it's not easy bringing people together, especially when they don't know each other, when you're in a pandemic and you're bringing people together across geographies. It's not easy at all. And also encouraging them, as someone who is a storyteller and very good at what I do, you're encouraging them to be vulnerable about parts of their lives that they wouldn't necessarily have previously exposed to the world. And that's not easy at all. It's taken me 15, 16 years to get to a point where I can do it with very, encourage people to do it with very much ease. So for you guys to have done that in less than a year is pretty impressive. And I really think you should take ownership of that. Storytelling is not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey, and it's led us to meet people like you. So yeah, it's been an experience, right, Panna?
Definitely. Dhruti, did you find people try to anglicize your name?
I end up anglicizing my name as well, to be honest with you. People do anglicize my name, but then in a way I'm a little bit sympathetic if I know, because not everyone can do the R thing, the Dhruti. So I'm a little bit more sympathetic. Sometimes I'm a bit lazy, because I will get to the point I'm like, my name's Dhruti, it's D for Delta, H for Hotel, R for Romeo, U for Uniform, T for Tango, I for India. But I try now, whenever I'm introducing myself to new people, to basically say that my name is Dhruti Shah. Please, if you can say it, great. If you can't, then here you go. But as I said, there's that, if you get a moment, the Michael Rosen podcast as well, they talk about the name and they talk about the heritage of names like ours. So
yeah, I suppose being called Panna, I was always called Anna or Hannah, and you sometimes you kind of brush it under the carpet and think, hey, whatever. But then sometimes you do say, no, it's actually Panna with a P at the beginning and no H at the end. And
it's like, if you can say other names, why can't you say Panna? Like, if you can say banana, which I'm sure you've probably been called before, why can't you say my name?
I'm sure.
You're like,
my father used to own a store, and this is like in the 80s, and his name's Jendy. So instead, there was this one woman who had this obsession of calling him Harry. And to this day, I still don't get it. And I'm like, I can understand Jay, but not Harry. So, I think names are very, very important. Their identification on who you are. And, I have a daughter and her name's Jasmine. And I hate people calling her Jazz, Jazzy. And I know her name is Jasmine.
Maybe that's something worth doing. If I'm honest with you, maybe it is something worth putting out on the group, just to see, what people are being called. Like, what's your name been mangled to? That would be really interesting as well, to sort of see what everybody comes up to. And you get so much engagement, I think, because it's a story that never goes away. Every time anyone mentions it, I just see constant levels of everyone has a story at the end of the day when it comes to.
It's actually quite funny, because everyone goes, is that his real name? I'm like, no, it used to be Balram. So we have an ongoing joke.
Oh, that's amazing. Right.
Thank you so much. Could have gone on for another 2 hours. I think we could have talked about your various other amazing articles you've written, but we kind of probably run out of time. I know we need to pick up kids and things. So thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And I hand over to Sonali.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've learned so much in this time, and hopefully we'll look out for more stuff from you as well, and maybe more interviews once you've kind of done another battle for another book. Hopefully it'll be easier now, though, now that you're an established author. And hopefully this interview also will let all the Oshwals know on Oshwal Connect that, you know, look, we've got a journalist here, we've got an author, we're doing well, and you know, to reach out to you as well with all the ongoing stuff. But yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a brilliant day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.